Wyoming Territory, July 1882. By the time the first light cracked over the Absaroka Range, Elijah Hartley figured he had no reason to keep riding. He was done with cattle drives, done with smoke and gunpowder, and trying to outrun the ghosts that had followed him since Dodge. His horse, a quiet bay gelding named Samson, slowed as they crested a ridge above the Wind River Valley. Elijah pulled off his hat and wiped the summer dust from his brow. He had not spoken to another soul in 6 days. He expected today to be no different. But then he saw her. She stood near the edge of a shallow creek, her dress soaked to the knees, one hand on her back like the weight of the world pressed down on her spine. She was barefoot, belly round with child. Her hair was dark and tangled from the wind, and she looked over at him like she had been waiting. Elijah blinked. Thought maybe he was dreaming. "I do not mean any harm," he called out, raising one palm slowly. The woman straightened, eyes wide but not afraid. "Then maybe you're the first man in weeks who can say that true." Elijah dismounted, leading Samson down the slope. He kept his movements slow, cautious. "Name's Elijah Hartley," he said. "You all right, ma'am?" She looked down at her swollen belly, then back at him. "Not hardly. My name is Willa Vaughn. I walked out of a church in Jackson 3 nights ago before the vows were finished." Elijah stopped a few paces from her, his boots sinking into the soft river bank. "Runaway bride?" Willa nodded once, her chin trembling. "He was not the man I thought. He made promises, then raised his hand before our wedding night even came. I had to go. I do not care what folks think. You got every right," Elijah said, his voice steady. "You hurt anywhere?" "No. Just tired. And heavy. The baby's due next month." She looked at him carefully, eyes narrowing. "You always ride alone?" "Lately, yes." "Why?" Elijah glanced toward the mountains. "Because it hurts less than riding with men who do not come back." A quiet stretched between them, filled by the trickle of water and the wind pushing through the cottonwoods. Then Willa's knees buckled. Elijah lunged forward and caught her before she hit the ground. She was trembling all over. He eased her down into the grass, his arms firm around her back. "I am all right," she whispered. "Just dizzy. I have not eaten since yesterday morning." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the last of his jerky and a canteen. "Here. Slow." She chewed carefully, sipping water between bites. Her hands shook, but her eyes stayed locked on his. "Why help me?" she asked. "You do not know me." "Because someone should have helped you already." She looked away then, blinking fast. He did not press her. He sat beside her in the grass until the sun cleared the ridge and warmed the air. "I have a cabin about 5 miles east," Elijah said finally. "It is quiet. Safe. You can rest there. I will not touch you or ask questions you do not want to answer." Willa looked at him long and hard. Then she nodded. "All right." He helped her onto Samson's back, walking beside the horse all the way. Willa leaned forward, resting her hands over her belly. "You have a wife?" she asked after a while. "No," Elijah said. "Had a brother once. He died in Kansas 2 years ago. After that, I stopped looking for anything that felt like family." Willa was quiet for a stretch. Then she said, "Maybe you should start again." Elijah looked up at her. She was watching him with something soft in her eyes. Not pity. Not fear. Just something steady and real. And he felt something stir in his chest he had not felt in years. Hope. They reached the cabin just before midday. It was small, set back against a stand of pines, with a porch and a stone chimney. Elijah helped Willa down and led her inside. The air smelled of pine and smoke and something clean. "You can take the bed," he said, pointing toward the back room. "I will sleep out here near the fire." She looked at him. "I would feel better if you stayed close. Just not too far." He nodded once. "Then I will be right here." That night, Elijah made stew from dried beans and salted rabbit. Willa sat close to the hearth, her hands wrapped around the bowl. She told him her parents had died of fever when she was 16. She had been living with distant cousins near Jackson, working as a seamstress, when she met the man who promised her a better life. He said he wanted a wife, she said. But he just wanted someone to own. Elijah did not speak. He just refilled her bowl and let the silence hold what words could not. Later, as the fire burned low, Willa looked at him across the room. You said you stopped looking for family, she said quietly. But maybe family is something you build, not something you find. Elijah looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just a woman broken from running but a woman full of fight, carrying life inside her, still standing. I would like to build something, he said. If you are not set on moving on. She smiled, small and tired but real. Then maybe we start with tomorrow. He nodded. Tomorrow sounds good. That night, Elijah lay on the floor, staring at the rafters, listening to the soft sound of her breath from the next room. And for the first time in years, he did not feel alone. When dawn came again, he was already up, water boiling, bread baking on the hearthstone. Willa stepped out, her hand resting on the doorframe, her dress hanging looser over her belly after a night of real rest. She looked at him and smiled. And Elijah Hartley knew. His darkest hour had passed. Because somehow, in the middle of nowhere, at the edge of everything, he had found her. And she had given him hope. The morning broke cool and gray, the kind of sky that held its breath. Elijah stepped outside with a brimming tin mug, steam curling as he sipped. The porch boards creaked beneath his boots. Behind him, the quiet shuffle of bare feet on pine floorboards told him Willa was up. She stood in the doorway with her shawl drawn tight, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder. Her gaze tracked the distant ridgeline. You were gone long? She asked. Only to check the traps, he said. River's too low for fish, but I left some snares in the aspens. One rabbit, maybe two if luck holds by evening. She nodded. I can mend that shirt of yours. The one with the torn cuff. If you want. Elijah looked down at the fray near his wrist. He hadn't noticed it until now. I'd be grateful. She crossed to where his clothes hung near the hearth, already folded neat from the night before. Her fingers worked the fabric as though remembering something they hadn't touched in a long while. You sew like someone who taught herself, he said. I did. Not well, but enough. You were alone a long time. She paused, then met his eyes. Yes. And not always by choice. He didn't ask what she meant. He only stepped closer, setting his coffee down on the table. There's a quilt in the trunk-top shelf. It's yours now. My mother pieced it during lean winters. Said it kept her soul warm more than her skin. Willa opened the trunk with care, running her hand over the faded calico and stitched stars. She must have been strong. She was, Elijah said. Quiet strong. The kind that holds a man together long after she's gone. Willa laid the quilt gently over the cot in the back room. When she returned, her hands were tucked into her sleeves. I have nothing like that. No keepsakes. Left everything behind but a tin brooch and a half-written letter. He didn't ask who the letter had been for. Instead, he pulled a small tin box from a shelf above the hearth and handed it to her. There's thread, needles, buttons. You can keep it. Her eyes lingered on his face before she took it. You give more than you take. Elijah shrugged. I gave too little once. Now I try to balance the scales. The day passed in quiet rhythm. Willa cleaned the hearth and folded linens, stopping often to rest. Elijah split logs and repaired the shed door, glancing toward the window each time he passed. When the sun dipped low, he brought in the 2 rabbits, set to skinning them near the stoop. Willa came out with a basin of water, kneeling beside him without a word. Her sleeves were rolled, hands steady. He passed her one of the carcasses, and they worked side by side. I never thought I'd sit like this again, she said after some time. Like what? Beside a man who doesn't use silence to punish. Elijah didn't look up. Some silences are shelter. Not all of them wound. She was quiet then, but her hand rested briefly on his forearm before she rose. That evening, the stew tasted richer than the night before. They ate by lamplight, the shadows stretching long across the walls. After they finished, Willa took the tin plates to the basin. Elijah leaned against the doorframe, watching the trees sway under a rising wind. You expecting anyone to come looking for you? He asked. No one who'd come this far, she said. But if he finds me, he won't, Elijah said, firm. And if he does, he won't leave with you. Willa turned, her jaw tight. You don't know him. I don't need to, he said. I know what kind of man lays hands on a woman and calls it love. She stared at him, something unreadable in her face. Then she said, You ever been in love, Elijah? It hung there, heavier than any silence before. No, he said. But I've seen it. My brother had it once. Before the war changed him. Before we lost everything but our names. Willa dried her hands on a cloth, then crossed the floor and stood in front of him. I don't know what love looks like, she said. But I know what it doesn't. They stood close, the air between them thin. Elijah's hand hovered at her elbow, not touching. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know, she whispered. That's why I stayed. She stepped back first, retreating into the back room. Elijah listened to the creak of the cot, the soft rustle of the quilt as she settled. He remained near the door, watching the woods until the stars came out, one by one. Inside, the fire burned low, but the warmth lingered. And for the first time in a long while, Elijah didn't dread the dark. By the next afternoon, the wind had shifted. It came down off the high country, dry and restless, carrying with it the faint scent of distant grass fires. Elijah spent the morning reinforcing the cabin shutters, hammering new hinges onto the back door that had sagged in its frame. Willa watched him from the porch for a time, seated on a stool with her hands resting on her lap, her breath slower than usual. He glanced over once, catching the furrow in her brow. You're short-winded, he said. She nodded. Been that way since last night. Not pain, just tight. Like there's not enough room left inside me. Could be the baby shifting down, he said. My mother used to say that meant it was near time. Willa looked toward the slope behind the cabin. I never thought I'd give birth in a place with pine trees outside the window. I always pictured lace curtains and a midwife fussing. I can ride to town, Elijah said. There's a woman named Mrs. Hargreaves who's helped with births for 20 years. She lives 3 miles past the trading post. If you want her here, she'll come. And you'd leave me alone? I'd ride fast, he said. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. Let's wait another day. I'd rather not be alone, even for a few hours. He left it at that. By evening, she asked for a basin and sat by the hearth, soaking her feet in warm water laced with crushed mint he'd gathered that spring. Elijah peeled potatoes by the table, glancing over now and then. You always lived out here? She asked. I came west after Kansas broke me. Spent time in Montana Territory, then settled here last autumn. Land's clean. Water runs cold. No one asks questions. You own this place? He shook his head. Leased it from a widow who moved in with her daughter back east. She said she was tired of chopping wood with a bent spine. Willa leaned back, one hand at the base of her neck. Seems like you've been taking care of everyone but yourself. Elijah scraped the last peel into a tin bucket. I've done things I can't undo. Helping now is the only way I sleep. She looked at him then, not with pity, but something quieter. Sleep's not the same as peace. No, he said, but it's a start. That night either of them spoke much. The wind blew harder, rattling the stovepipe and moaning under the eaves. Elijah kept the fire fed and stayed near the door, rifle within reach. Willa sat with her hands folded over her belly, eyes half closed, listening. Just before dawn, Elijah found her standing by the window, her face pale. "I think it's time," she said. He nodded once. "I'll fetch water and heat more towels." She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "You ever helped with a birth?" "No," he said. "But I've helped a man hold on long enough to live. That has to count for something." They prepared the cabin in silence. Elijah cleared the cot and laid fresh cloths. Willa removed her dress slowly, folding it with care. She moved with the focus of someone who had known pain before and would meet it again on her own terms. The sun rose behind the ridge, casting long gold lines through the window. Elijah stood by the door, hands clenched, until Willa called to him. "I need you." He crossed the floor without hesitation. She reached for his hand, her grip iron tight. "Don't go." "I won't," he said. The labor stretched into midday. When the cries came, they were raw and sharp, echoing through the rafters. Elijah stayed by her side, wiping sweat from her brow, murmuring steady words that said nothing and everything all at once. And then, at last, the child arrived, a daughter, small and slick with life, her first cries thin but fierce. Willa leaned back, eyes closed. "Is she all right?" Elijah held the infant in his large, calloused hands, wrapping her in a clean cloth. "She's perfect." Willa reached for her, and he laid the baby against her chest. The cabin fell silent again, save the rhythmic sound of the infant's breath. "I didn't think I could do it," she whispered. "You did." She looked up at him, eyes rimmed red. "You stayed. I told you I would." She touched his wrist, fingers barely brushing his skin. "Would you stay longer than today?" Elijah knelt beside her, his voice low. "I'd stay as long as you'll have me." Willa smiled, exhaustion softening every edge. "Then you're hers now, too." He looked down at the child, her tiny hands curling in sleep. "I'll be whatever she needs." Outside, the wind had died. The sky was wide and clear again, and the pine trees stood still beneath it. Inside, 3 hearts beat in rhythm. Elijah Hartley knew the dark had passed, and it would not return. The days that followed settled into a rhythm born of necessity and quiet understanding. Willa remained mostly in the back room, her body healing, her daughter pressed close to her chest in near constant rest. Elijah moved through the cabin like a man who'd found the center of something he hadn't known he needed. He kept the fire steady, brought water from the creek, and carved a wooden cradle by lantern light. The wood was rough pine from a fallen tree near the ridge, shaped with care and sanded smooth where a small hand might curl. He didn't speak much while he worked, and Willa didn't interrupt him. On the 5th evening, the child opened her eyes and Elijah happened to be holding her. Willa had dozed off in the rocking chair, the baby tucked in his arms. He studied the small face, the faint flutter of lashes, the way her mouth opened like she had something important to say but hadn't yet found the words. Willa stirred and blinked toward them. "She likes you. She doesn't know any better," he said. "She knows warmth from cold. That's enough." He looked at her, as if trying to place how she could see all the way through him without saying much at all. "You think she'll remember this place?" "No," Willa said, her voice low. "But I will." He nodded, then shifted the baby back into her arms. She settled easily, soft and boneless against Willa's chest. "I've been thinking about names," Willa said. Elijah sat on the hearth, stretching his legs out. "Have you landed on one?" "Mara," she said. "It's from the old tongue. Bitterness. But it reminds me that from bitter can come something good." He rubbed the heel of his boot across the floorboard. "It suits her. There's something strong in it." Willa adjusted the blanket around the baby's feet. "My mother had a name like that. She was the kind of woman who didn't flinch when the barn caught fire. Just rolled up her sleeves and got to work." Elijah leaned back on his hands, watching her. "I'd have liked to meet her. She would have liked you." She didn't trust charm, but she believed in men who kept their word. He let that sit for a moment before speaking again. "When you were carrying her, Before you ran, what did you think your life would look like? Willa didn't answer right away. She traced a fingertip over Mara's cheek. I thought it would be quiet, but not in the way I wanted. I figured I'd be spoken for, but never really heard. I didn't think I'd have choices. And now? I think I do, she said. And I don't plan to waste them. The fire popped, sending a thin line of sparks up the chimney. Elijah stood and crossed to the window. The moon was rising, full and soft, washing silver over the trees. I've been carving something else, he said. Willa glanced toward the table. Not another cradle, I hope. He smiled faintly. No. A ring. She stilled. I know it's not time yet, he said. But I wanted to make it anyway. Not to ask, just to show you where my heart's gone. Willa rose carefully, Mara still asleep in her arms. She crossed to him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. I don't need a promise yet, she said. But I need to know you're not waiting for me to come to my senses and leave. I'm not, he said. I've made peace with the idea that this is where I'm meant to be. She looked up at him, her voice steadier now. Then we'll see what grows here. You and me. He touched her hand lightly, then the curve of Mara's back. The baby sighed in her sleep, her tiny fingers curling against Willa's collarbone. That night, Elijah didn't sleep on the floor. He stayed in the chair beside their bed, boots off, rifle leaning near the door. He watched over both of them, the fire's glow flickering across their faces. Outside, the trees stood tall and still. Inside, the world had narrowed to 3 heartbeats in one small room. And for the first time in his life, Elijah Hartley was not waiting for something to end. He was learning how things begin. The thaw came early that year, softening the earth before April, and Elijah could feel it in the way the birds returned to the trees and the ground let go of its frost without a fight. The air held that damp, rich scent of newness, like the land was exhaling after a long sleep. He stepped out with a spade one morning, intent on turning soil for a kitchen garden, and found Willa already out by the clearing, Mara tucked snug against her chest in a cotton sling. You're up early, he said. She nodded and toed the edge of the garden plot with her boot. She won't sleep past first light these days. Seems she's eager to know the world. He set the spade aside and came to her, brushing a windblown strand of hair from her brow. You all right to be out in the chill? I'm stronger now. I need to move. Sitting too long makes my thoughts go restless. He watched her a moment, then gestured to the slope. There's a spring just over that rise. We could walk it, if you feel up to it. Willa adjusted the sling and gave a short nod. I'd like that. They moved slow, Elijah matching her pace without remark. The snow melt had fed the creek thin and fast, and patches of wild onion pushed through the damp earth. A hawk circled high overhead, casting a long shadow on the ridge. When they reached the spring, Willa lowered herself onto a moss-covered rock and let Mara stretch in the sling, her tiny fists twitching in sleep. I never asked, she said after a while. Did you mean to stay here when you first came west, or was it just where your horse stopped? Elijah crouched near the edge of the water, his reflection fractured by the slow-moving current. I don't think I meant anything back then. I just kept riding until I stopped feeling hunted. And now? He turned toward her. Now I have something to protect. That makes a man stay put. She looked down at her daughter, then back at him. I want to marry you. Elijah's breath caught, like the wind had shifted too quickly in his chest. He straightened, searching her face for something uncertain, but found none. You sure? I wouldn't say it if I weren't. She reached for his hand. You gave me time. You gave her a name and a place to be born. I don't need lace or a preacher. I just need the man who held my hand when I didn't think I could keep breathing. He knelt in front of her, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist. Then marry me today. I'll carve the words into the porch beam and call that enough. She smiled, tired and sure. Carve them deep. They walked back slow, the sun warming their backs. Elijah stopped at the old trunk and pulled out the ring he'd carved. He'd shaped it from aspen, polished it with beeswax until it shone pale and smooth. No flourish, just the grain of the wood and the care in his hands. He slid it onto her finger by the hearth, the fire low and steady. Willa pressed her forehead to his, her breath warm on his cheek. "No one ever gave me something made with their own hands," she said. "You gave me a life to belong to," he said. "This was the least I could do." That night, they lay together in the narrow bed, Mara nestled in a cradle at its foot. The wind outside was softer now, bending the trees but not breaking them. Elijah's arm curled around Willa's waist, her back pressed to his chest. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The quiet between them was full. In the months that followed, they built their life without ceremony but full of intention. Elijah planted carrots, beans, and cabbage in the garden plot. Willa traded hand-stitched linens with a Shoshone woman who lived 2 valleys over, exchanging cloth for herbs and dried berries. Mara grew fast, her hair dark like her mother's and her laugh coming easy. They added a second room to the cabin by midsummer, and Elijah carved a wooden sign for the door with 3 names burned into the grain: Elijah, Willa, Mara. He hung it without a word. Willa kissed him on the porch and said nothing, but her eyes shone in the firelight. In late September, word reached them by way of a trapper that the man Willa had fled from had been found dead in a saloon outside. Lander shot over a gambling debt, buried without ceremony. Willa sat in the rocker with Mara in her lap and stared at the crackling fire for a long while. "You feel free?" Elijah asked gently. "I feel nothing," she said. "And maybe that's the peace I needed." They didn't speak of it again. On the first frost of October, Elijah placed Mara on his shoulders and walked the edge of the property, Willa beside him with her hand tucked into his coat pocket. The trees had turned gold and copper, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke and distant snow. "You ever think about what comes next?" Willa asked. "Every day," he said. "First time in my life I look forward to it." She squeezed his hand. "I want to teach her the names of trees. I want her to know what it means to grow something from seed." "She will," he said. "She'll grow up knowing strength doesn't have to be loud." They stood at the edge of the clearing, the sun rising slow and low behind them. Elijah bent and kissed her temple, then her cheek, then the corner of her mouth. Not rushed. Not urgent. Just sure. "I love you, Willa Hartley," he said. Her eyes softened, and she leaned into him. "I know. I love you too." And with the chill in the air and the child breathing soft on his shoulders, Elijah knew they had made something lasting. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. And that was enough to carry them through 100 winters more.